Oh, hello. We're live with Melissa.
Hi.
And welcome to the Flowers Workshop. We hope you enjoy. We hope you enjoy your kits and you'll come buy some more.
All right, so we are gonna get started with the flower workshop. Lots of different flowers to go over tonight and learn how to cut. It's gonna be kind of fun when you're at home on your kitchen table or your counter or something, but let's start by unpacking the box that you got. So in your kit, you found your bowl. This is for scraps and collecting. You've got your bag of green curls. These are what make all of the really fun flower stems. So lots of different sizes and shapes and curl in there. I hope I picked out a good variety for you. And fun note, the curls that are a little bit grainy, that's actually going to be sparkly when it comes out of the kiln. You also got your bag of glass. You have your stick of lavender, aka spiraled cane. You got your bag of beads in there, and so you've got those beads to use. Then we have when you're using your beads, I'm gonna throw those in the bowl. Oh, just in case. Thanks, Kevin. He just handed me the first aid kit with all the Band-Aids in it. And then we've got our different mosaic glass in here. So we've got your red, yellow, the two different yellows, and then the white. And then we have our smaller pieces that we will use: orange, purple, green, and then the hydrangea color. So those are our different colors. And the color choices are all based on this being our example. There we go. So we've got our big yellow sunflower, the white daisy, the tulip is orange. We've got the poppies up here. That's what the transparent red is for. These are our little, grape hyacinths. That's what someone told me they're called. And then we've got the little beads as well. So we are going to use this as our model. But as you are creating your flowers, I want you to feel free to create all one kind. You can do the whole variety. You can also do something very similar to what we're creating as well. So that's the plan. So those are what you should find in your kit. And then the other thing in your kit, or there are a couple of other things as well. This is your project tag. Now on your project tag, you'll put your name and your email, and you can tell us if you wanted to plate a bowl, a candle holder, if you wanted to leave it flat. A candle holder with this is a very specific design, so unless you know exactly how you're making your candle holder, then I don't recommend that, because we're not going over that while we're creating tonight. But then you'll see that I've got pictures of all of the different garden stands as well. So we've got the square that's on the diagonal, but we also have a new stand so that you can have your project on the square. So you've got two different choices for a square garden stand. Now this is a new one that we have so that you can, if you forget and you make all your flowers this way, we still have a stand for you as well. And yes, Donna, we can include a picture of the example project in your kit for you. It's also the one that we've used on all the Instagram and Facebook posts as well. All right, so you've got your tag. You can also choose other upgrades as well. That's down here at the bottom. You could leave it flat and add the hangers. You could do the four corners up, or just the fluted bowl as well if you wanted to leave it flat. But that's all a decision that you can make afterwards. And then the other thing that you'll find in your kit, so we've got our tools. You also got a bottle of glue, everybody except Linda. I'm really sorry. We'll get that to you tomorrow. And as we go through the workshop tonight, I will, once I get it all done with the teaching, I'll show you the things that I need you to glue as you're, after you're done with your projects. And we can answer any questions about that as well. So don't let me forget to go over gluing. Now, let's see, what else was in our kit? Safety glasses, of course, because we are going to be cutting the mosaic tonight. We're going to make sure that we're wearing our safety glasses, so I'm going to put mine on right now. And then the tools that we have, so you have a pair of tweezers, you got a Sharpie, you have your scoring tool. I have 2 pairs of tweezers. And then you have your runner that goes with your scoring tool, and then you have a pair of glass cutters as well. Before we packed up the kit, just so you know, everything was washed and sanitized. And I also rotated the blades, so everybody should have a nice sharp set of blades for your on your glass cutter. Now, you had the choice of creating on a circle or on a square, like this one. I'm realizing that you can't see mine very well. So I am gonna go get a piece of paper. I'll be right back. All right, now I know that this is the candle holder template, but I think it's gonna make it easier or not to see the piece. So let me know if you can't see the piece I'm creating on, but I think I'm gonna use the circle today. I usually use a square in the workshop. Oh, the other thing that was in your kit was the wooden board. Now, if you've been in the studio before, you know that this is usually what you put your project on, but I want you to do your cutting on your board tonight rather than your project on your board, unless you're, outside in your garage on your workbench or something where you think you can cut the glass directly on that surface. But put your project on the table next to your board and use your board as your cutting surface. I'm gonna do that here so you guys can see that as well. Now, first flower that we are going to talk about is how to do a big sunflower like this one. Now you're going to need your yellow for this one, both yellows. In fact, you'll need both of those yellows, and then make sure you grab your Sharpie. Now as we go through this, or as I go through this, I'm not expecting you to follow along and cut at the exact same time. I'm going to go through the different flowers, go through the different tools, and then I'll stay live if you guys need me to show you other things. But make sure you ask your questions in the comments on the video, and I will respond to those whether I am live or not. I'll stay on board with you so that we can get through the night together. And if you have questions about how it looks, you can always post a picture in the comments as well. And then when we are done, it'll be fun to post a picture of our finished project before it's fired, so we all can see how everyone's doing. This will be an interesting way to try out the workshop tonight. It's a lot of fun to wander around the tables and see what everybody else creates, so we've got to do that a little differently tonight. So to make this large flower like this, I want my petals a little bit shorter than what the width of this piece of glass is. So I'm actually going to, so you can see it, use my Sharpie to draw, to cut this rectangle a little shorter, because this is going to be the width of my flower petals. So I'm going to use my scoring tool to cut that off. Remember, when we're using the scoring tool, hold it where it's textured, like you hold a pen or a pencil. Where the two angles come together at the bottom is that little wheel, and that wheel is what needs to make contact with the glass. And when you use your scoring tool, remember 3 things. Number 1, hold that tool nearly straight up and down. You'll see that this is almost perfect. You can look straight down it, and I want you to tip it back just a hair so you can just barely see the bolts. And then lean into it like it's holding you up. And 3, push all the way across from one edge of the glass to the other. Now the two words to remember when you are using your scoring tool, number one, you need to score with confidence, and two, with determination. And then you can score anything. Now, scoring tool doesn't break the glass by itself. Pairs with that tool called a runner. Make sure your gold bolt is up, pointing towards the ceiling. The gold line that's on top of your scratch, you probably can't see mine very well. The gold line on top of the tool goes on top of your scratch, so they go in the same direction. Make sure you've got glass sticking out of both sides of the tool, and then squeeze like you use scissors to break the glass apart. Now, this is gonna be the perfect width for my flower petals here. And so I'm gonna use my Sharpie and I'm gonna draw from one edge of the glass to the other. And we're gonna mass produce some petals here. Now, as you're going through this, and as you're drawing out your different petals, uniformity is not our goal. Tonight we wanna be successful scorers as we go through this. So, I'm gonna use my scoring tool and I'm gonna be able to scratch and score all of these lines before I grab my runner. So, leaning into it, all the way around, oops, right off the edge, one edge to the other. Now I'm gonna use my elbow. The other thing is that you're gonna wanna be wherever, hello Mr. Fly, whichever hand you are, so I'm right-handed. I'm gonna have my piece of glass out more in front of my hip than in front of my belly button, because that allows my arm to swing freely as I'm scoring. So my elbow is sticking way out. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm gonna scratch all the way across one edge of the glass to the other. I tend to move my body when I'm scoring. It's almost like a hip action as well, sway side to side to help you get that curve. We can do all of the scratching, and then we can do all of the running. So, put my gold bowl up, line up that line. Now I know it's a little bit narrow, but you want to go where you have the most glass on either side of the scratch. And then with good, confident scratches, just pop your way right through that. So don't forget those two words, confidence and determination. Now, a couple of things. If you have a towel or a rag at home, that's a great way to sweep the glass off to the side and consolidate your scraps. The other thing is it's great for catching your little scraps. So if I want to clean up this edge, it's definitely too narrow to use my runner on. So I'm going to use the glass cutters. Now they do look like a can opener, and where those discs come together is where I'm going to cut the glass. But because we don't want little glass shards all over our house, I'm holding this nice and square. So the discs are straight up and down. I've got the flower in my left hand, but the glass flies out the back of those discs. So if I don't want them to fly, I turn the discs facing up, and I want the glass to be, or I want it to be tipped towards a towel. The towel prevents the glass from bouncing. So you eliminate that little bounce that you get, and then the towel is going to catch your glass as well. So we've got that. Now we're going to do the same with this lighter yellow. Again, I want those pieces to be a little bit shorter. I'm going to do some irregular ones this time. Now, this is new for me. Normally I don't draw all my shapes, but I want you to be able to see what I'm trying to cut. Now again, we're not going for uniformity or perfection, so if you don't scratch on your line, that is totally okay, because that's not our goal. Our goal is to score successfully. So, first thing, all the way across, break that off, gold line on my scratch, break that off, and then I'm going to scratch all of these lines here and create some different yellow flowers. these off. Well, scrap Tulip over here. Very interesting having the whole table to myself. It's definitely lonelier here without an audience watching how we make all of these flowers. Your reaction and questions definitely make this a fun experience, but I'm excited to try this new venue, this new platform, doing these live online. So I've got all these petals. Now you notice I didn't count, and I am notorious for not counting, but I also like symmetry, so this is going to be unusual. And I want to lay these out, and I'm going to go for just some really random. I want some on top, some on the bottom. Yeah, I missed out on the symmetry. Symmetry done already. I'm gonna let these, I want these off to the side. Okay. Still going here. Maybe one extra. It's all right. I'm sure we can figure out how to use that later. And so we'll lay those out. Now we can layer the glass up to 3 layers high. Again, no right or wrong way to do it. Just remember that if we're working with transparent glass, what you see through the glass is what's going to show up on your project. So sometimes we don't want to put transparent yellow on top of blue because it makes green and we don't want green. But in this case, I find that the variation in the layering is kind of fun, makes it a little bit more natural. Now for the center of this bead, we have this really fun, like bright orangey red bead, and I'm gonna put that right there in the middle. But I'm actually gonna do that later, because if I bump this flower and that bead falls off, that's just one more thing that I have to figure out how to rearrange. So I'm just going to set that off to the side, and we'll work with that later. Now, again, don't forget you can dust off your board if you're getting little shards. Don't forget it's the little ones that get you. Watch the back of your hand as far as when you need a Band-Aid. Now, let's go over cutting kind of a 5-star daisy, as I like to call it, out of the white. So using the white. Now again, if you're wanting to make a larger flower, you want to work with a wider piece of glass. So if I wanted a really big daisy, I'm going to work this direction on the glass. But because for the sake of example, I'm putting a lot of different flowers on the piece, I'm gonna actually make this shorter. So just like I did with the yellow piece, I'm gonna cut this shorter with that scoring tool. And again, really lean on it. Confidence and determination, those are our words. I'm pretty sure it came from the flower workshop. Yes, the little pieces. All right, now to create this flower, all flower petals start out as triangles if we're going for a flower petal like this. So we are going to draw some long, skinny triangles from edge to edge on this piece of glass. Scoring tool, one edge to the other, lean into it, push all the way across. If you're really leaning on it, you can hear fingernails on a chalkboard, and everywhere else that's not a great sound, but here at MoltenWorks that is a good sound because it means you're scoring with determination, and that's what we like. So using our runner, again, lining it up. Now you notice sometimes there's not very much glass over here, but I'm going where there's the most glass on either side of the scratch. So it ends up being about halfway up each triangle. So now I have these variety of triangles that I'm going to use for my daisy, and it's okay if I want a 5 pointed flower, but I have 6 here because one of them might crack in half. So flower petals, grabbing that long edge, we're going to use the glass cutters and clip our way around the edge, and that ruffly edge that you get by using the glass cutters is to our advantage. And I always like to nip off the bottom of that triangle for the flower petal for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not a big fan of super pointy triangles in my flowers, but it also helps them help us fit them a little closer together when we are trying to fit our flower together and get a bead to sit on top of it, if that's how we're doing our center. So keep working my way around these different pieces. When you use your glass cutters, make sure you experiment with how far apart each clip is, because you'll get a different texture depending on how much space you leave in between each clip. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that on a scrap piece of glass really quick. But the glass cutters get you your texture. Oh, I might want this guy, so I'm just going to cut them up anyways. Or maybe my flower will have 6 petals. Well, who knows? So what I was talking about when you get different texture based on how wide or how much space is in between each step. So if I'm talking, so when we use the glass cutters, if I'm talking about my discs coming together at these 2 spots, that's pretty far apart. And we're going to start with the discs parallel to the edge of our glass. And so you make a natural wave like that. There you go. But now if we go close together, like if I'm like this, right? Everybody can see that. And then we clip close together. We still get ruffles, but not quite as deep of ruffles. So that's a good, so the glass cutters are one way to manipulate, the texture that's on the edge of your glass. Now, if I'm gonna put this guy together over here on my base piece, I think I got one really giant one. I'm gonna make this one shorter. This one too. And that's another thing, is that another reason to cut off the end of that tip is because it helps you, it can help you keep the length of your petals more uniform. Now this guy, I think I want that big green bead in there for the center of that stem. Now, second, excuse me. Now another flower petal to make using the same triangle technique is our poppies. These are lots of fun. The end result is what's great when we're creating them. They don't always look so great, but all flower petals start out as triangles. So on this rectangle piece of glass, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it right down the middle. And so I'm going to make a rectangle here. 2 rectangles out of 1 rectangle. And then holding it with lengthwise here, again, I'm going to create some triangles using the scoring tool. Confidence and determination are our 2 words. If you're at home with kids and they need some spelling and working on some schoolwork, maybe they get to spell that one in glass. Oh, Donna, that's so wonderful. I'm so glad that you're learning so much. You'd never know that all of this stuff is going in my head, and I really want you to know it in a Sip and Fuse class. It's just so hard to say all of this in front of 30 people. So you're right. So this platform is going to be really good. Now, same thing for these poppies. They start out as triangles, but we're going to use the glass cutters to create the edges of our pieces. The first thing I like to do on my poppy is create a little divot up at the top. So holding my discs together or holding the discs parallel to that top edge of the glass, halfway in between 2 points, and it creates a little arch, kind of like somebody just took a bite out of the glass. Nip off your corners, and that creates one flower petal. Keep going, start with that divot, nip off your corners. The corners don't really turn out very sharp again in the kiln. Remember, because the glass makes that nice, or the kiln melts that nice and soft. So we're not really worried about those little corners that we see on these flower petals. This is where before and after is a little bit deceiving, because before we see sharp edges and corners, but it's after that we get our soft edges on our flower petals. So I think I'm gonna put 2 of these red flowers on here, and so I'm gonna make some more triangles over here. And again, you don't have to have a uniform size for your triangles. It's fun to have different sizes for your flower petals. Break those off. Again, where the glass is nice and wide, so you want as much glass as possible on both sides of that scratch. I'm gonna create my divots in here. Now the scraps, as we're going to discover later, that we're creating can become part of our project as well. So we don't ever let anything go to waste around here. We're going to use as much as we can. If you saw our live stream earlier of making curls, that's what we use a lot of the scraps for, is to make those curls, because we make those here in the studio for you. Now, I'm just going to show you, so this is a smaller triangle that doesn't necessarily match up with what you might want for your poppies, but something like this could very easily be its own little flower bud, and you could give it its own spot on your project as well. So now when we lay these out, you can experiment with which piece you lay on top, but for this flower, I set 2 side by side, not really touching. They kind of lean away from each other, and then drop a petal right on top of it to bridge that gap. And so that's, again, it looks kind of funny as we're starting here, but it's how it melts in the kiln in the end that gets us the result that we want. So those are our making flower petals out of triangles. So far we've made a sunflower, we've made a daisy, we've made some poppies. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, let's make one more flower, because this one is kind of fun. I don't know if you can see this, but I threw this one on this example last time, and it's kind of square petals. So very similar to the starting with triangles, but we're just not going to bring them together in a point. So I want a shorter rectangle here. Now you can't see on this piece if I draw on it with the Sharpie, so I'm just going to cut off a piece here. This is my transparent purple that I'm using. And then instead of my corners coming together, I'm going to leave space. And what I mean by corners, instead of my scratches meeting at the other side. Break that off. With a good confidence score, you still can break off something that's pretty narrow and small. As you can see, there's barely any glass on both sides of the runner. But a good confidence score can get you that nice, clean, crisp piece. Now I want these a little bit shorter, just for the sake of my project. And then as I lay these out, I make myself a little 5-point flower. I don't know about this one. And lay this down. This one I kind of came up with as an abstract flower, a little bit square, and then I took one of the beads and just dropped it right there in the middle. Doesn't even need to touch, just sort of gets to float there. So that's another way to create flowers as well. All right, let's make some lavender. Now, spiraled cane, we all know that it makes a little corkscrew when we lay it down flat, but when we get the little lavender, it's because we're laying down cross sections. Now here's the key. You're gonna hold your cane vertical, right on your board, and you're gonna hold the discs face down, hold your glass cutter with the discs face down, and you want it to tap on the board. And with still holding the cane vertical, squeeze those discs together and create those different pieces. Now, this does a whole bunch of things for us. Number one, it means that the glass doesn't fly all over the place. Number two, it gives us a uniform piece as to lay out on our project, but it also gives us an even surface so that it doesn't tip over as we're trying to set that on our project. So to set this out, this is where we get to introduce a little bit of glue to what we're doing. So we need a scrap piece of mosaic. We're gonna put a couple of drops of glue on it, and this is called the dip and stick method. So you, with your tweezers, pick up your piece of lavender, dip it in the glue, and stick it on the glass. Now the glue does not dry right away. It takes a good 30, maybe even 40 minutes to dry. So you have lots of time to play around with where your lavender is going to be on your project. Again, you don't have to build the flowers in this order. You could do all lavender, but it's fun to use the words dipstick and not be in elementary school. So dip and stick, that's the gluing method here. And it's just for these things that that we don't want to wobble or roll around. The reason we don't use glue on all of the other pieces, like put a piece of glue on it or put glue on it and stick it down, is that the glue is very liquidy, as you probably noticed, and it can cause your pieces of mosaic to float away. And we don't want them to float away. But we also, now there's lots of glue out there that we could just stick things down with, right? Elmer's makes a whole bunch. I saw a lot of glitter glue today when I was in Michael's. But the reason that we don't use a lot of, we don't use a lot of glue or other types of glue is that because they're made out of chemicals, those chemicals don't burn off in the kiln. And so you're left with a residue on your project. And we don't like that residue. I don't like the residue for you. And so we don't use a lot of the other glues on the project. Every once in a while we will super glue something down, but because the chemicals that are in super glue, they burn off real caustic, and it's not great for the kiln. So those are our little lavender pieces there. So use the dip and stick method with the glue for that lavender and then you get to lay those down. Now, another flower that is on our piece is a tulip. Now, I realized as I handed all of these out that I should have given everybody a little bit of a template for this. So I'm going to try and make this easy to draw out. So with your piece of orange, and honestly, you can use whatever color you want, but it's orange in my example, so I gave you an orange piece of glass. And we want to, just inside the edge, we want to create a U. And then right at the top, we want to flare that out. And then we're going to draw a line straight up the middle. So now we have a funky looking W. And then we're going to arch that over to each corner. So we create that connection. So draw a U, give it some flare, draw a line straight up the middle, and then connect those two corners. And when you draw your line, you're going to start at the bottom, and it's about halfway between the top and the bottom. And now we draw a triangle on top of that. So make it like a mountain peeking out from inside your two pieces. I'm gonna hold that up. Everybody see that? So I know that this is gonna be awesome. Hi, Courtney. Now, cutting this out. We're gonna cut all of it out and we're gonna put it back together like a puzzle. Turn it over because I wanna start right here. And we're not gonna go all the way around. We are gonna actually come out the other side, because when we score, we need to go from one edge of the glass to the other. So really lean into that all the way around. Do the same thing over here, all the way around. And then I'm gonna cut right down the middle. And instead of going over my scratch again, I'm gonna start at the scratch and go out to the edge. And then start out my scratch, go out to the edge of the glass. And then we're gonna use the runner and break the glass in the order that we scratched it. So we're gonna follow that same order. So I'm gonna start over here, get where the glass is nice and wide. Now if it doesn't break right away, make small adjustments, side to side with your wrist. Maybe you need to be a little closer to the edge where your scratch starts. It's always okay to turn the glass around and try and break it from the other side. Because if I try right here, oh, I didn't think that that was going to work, but it did. But you might need to try different. Wow. All right. I'm trying to show you that it could be difficult, but I guess I scored with too much determination because I really want you to learn. So now I have my tulip in here. Now I'm gonna scoot my lavender out of the way because I ran out of space. Again, see, I told you the glue is super loose. We get to play with that for a long time. And I'm gonna put my tulip right in there. Ouch. Take my triangle. And I like to give it, you could put it all back together, but I like to leave a little bit of space so that when we fuse it, you get that separation. And again, it looks nice and pointy right now, but you get a nice soft edge when that melts in the kiln. Now, let's talk a little bit about the centers of our flowers. So we talked about you can use a bead for the center of your flower, like this one. It's always good. You can also use, I'm gonna take this guy off. You can also use chips and scraps. So you created a whole bunch of, by now we've probably got purple and white and red scraps, all those little pieces. We're gonna make great centers. We've got some yellow in here too. You could always chip up some more of your yellow. And these little pieces then could be the center of your flower. If you're thinking about doing a really big sunflower, this is a great way to fill the center of a sunflower, is to use chips of different pieces of glass. And so that's a way to make it really look like you've got all those seeds in there. And you can always pull your petals apart too, so that it's almost like you're filling a hole in there. So that's another way to do a center of your flower as well. Now if we want to give our poppies a little black center, that's where you've got a little piece of black in your kit. Use those glass cutters to clip off a corner. Make sure you're using your towel. You could even put your towel over your bowl, and that gives it a little cave to fall in. And again, tip the discs up so that the glass flies down into your towel and your bowl. And if you zigzag your way down your scrap of glass, you can create some triangles, maybe some weird little squares, and you'll find the right piece of glass that you want for your the bottom of your poppy. Now I do a couple of things. One is I scoot a piece of black underneath that center flower petal, and then I set a second one on top of it. use your tweezers, take a deep breath, exhale as you're placing them down. That's something that I learned in yoga. So don't forget to breathe while you're doing this. Now, thank you, Karen. It's not that they come out perfect, it's that I figured out what to do with each random little scrap. And that's why I always cut a little bit more than I think I need, because maybe I just haven't cut the right piece yet. So that's one way. That's another way to do the centers, is to start with those little scraps. You could just do one. You could do more as well. Now, another flower that's on this example is this little grape hyacinth. You'll also notice that this is a little red something over here. These are literally the scraps that are on the table. Now, because I just used some in my center, I'm gonna need to make a few more. And I'm gonna grab one of those flower petals and tip that glass up, clip, clip, clip away. Make quite a few pieces. Again, you never know which one is gonna be the one that you want, but in this case, we're gonna pinch, pinch a few. I think I'm gonna clip up some purple so I can have some purple in this mix as well. I don't know what flowers are purple and red, but in my imagination, they exist. So they're gonna exist on my glass too. Clip this up, and you can clip as much as you want. And then use the towel, you can shake it down, and then you give a little pinch, make a pile, and just squish it all together. And if one gets in the way, scoot it back and pile that up. I got a little bit more in here, so I'm gonna make another one. And we're gonna use that same technique when we make the grape. Let's see, what are they called? Grape hyacinths. Now, that's this color. Looks a little hydrangea-y. You could make a hydrangea out of it, I guess. But same technique. Tip those discs up, clip them into the bowl. Nice and firm. One thing that I'm doing, I just realized that is helping me keep this stable, is that I have my finger braced against the top of the other disc. So I'm kind of, instead of just free holding it where it doesn't seem quite as stiff, I've got my finger placed against that other disc to help stabilize it. So I'm not just balancing that all by myself. Two hands. So then we make this flower right in here. Oh, that's just going to end up with red in it. We're going to put another one up here. And then we can always do, now, you have quite a few beads in your bowl and in your kit. I don't want you to feel bad if you just default to using beads for your flowers, because quite frankly, there's no shame in it, first of all, but I think they're pretty awesome. So as you're laying out your beads for your flowers, you can always pick and choose. I tried to give you a good variety of colors so that you could use for a center. Now I know I dropped that in there and I always make it look really easy, but it's because I get to practice a lot. So, but one good way, once you get it in the center, beads are always great. You can always squish these around. It's also okay to use the bead upside down. Sometimes it's a little easier to hold because you're holding on the wide flat surface. So you can always set that bead down upside down, and then use your other beads around it to create that flower. You can also go really abstract and just use one bead as your flower. That does exist somewhere in nature, but also in our imagination, which is more important than whether it exists in nature. So single beads are great. No shame in defaulting to that. It's not really default, it's using your imagination. So filling your piece up that way. Now, I really want to use this bead on here for a flower. And maybe this one as well. We've been making a lot of different colors lately. So now, I always do my stems last, which you probably have now realized because there are no stems on my piece. I prefer to fill my piece with flowers, just because I find a lot of delight in that, but also because then I am showing you how to make all the different flowers on one piece. But your stems, you can do your stems lots of different ways. I usually like to find kind of a focal point and work my way around from there. But instead of, thinking of, there being a bottom or a top to this, I'm just going to let my stems kind of be where they may. And then when this fits into a garden stand, we'll just see where that is. Use your glass cutters for your stems. When you're cutting your curls, don't try and break these with your fingers unless it's real thin, like the angel hair pasta. Because like this one I can break because it's nice and thin, but don't try and break these ones that are thick. It doesn't feel good when it goes through your thumb. Personal experience. So we want to keep that to a minimum. So I'm going to give my tulip a nice fat stem right here. I like the long thin ones when I'm doing some of these pieces. Again, it doesn't really, they don't really need to look like anything. Again, because it's what's in our imagination that's more important. I want a shorter one. So as you're creating your flowers, and then again, the glue's not going to be dry, so I'm going to be able to move this lavender a little bit so that I've got space to lay down a nice long stem right here. The lavender always looks great if it's off the stem a little bit, not touching it. Let's do another one. I got some good ones over here. Slide that in. Yes, I do like to play Tetris, and I was good at Operation as a kid. So those skills have translated very well. So get that all laid out. So let's see where else I want to use some stems. Let these curl together. Now you might have some, you might have ended up with a good curly one in your kit. I hope I managed to get everybody something nice and curly in their kit. I think I'm totally going to replace this one. It's okay to change your mind. It's called art. And then I want it to be about this long, just because it's too fun not to have this in our design. Now, I'm not going to be able to fit stems on everyone, so I'm just going to leave these beads out here. Leave my bead flowers in here without any anchors or any what are these called? These are called stems. Now, let's make some leaves as well. Now, we're going to start out with a difficult leaf because I'm going to show you how to cut a bead. Because we can cut a bead in half using the glass cutters. You're welcome, Donna. And then if these are sitting on edge, these make great leaves as well. So, bet you didn't know you could cut a bead. You can also, we can also cut leaves from a rectangle of glass. Now you've got some green in there. I like to start with a much narrower rectangle. So for that, I need my scoring tool again. Confidence and determination all the way across. Give that a squeeze. And then I'm going to cut in a fan motion. So I'm going to use the Sharpie to show you how I'm moving the glass cutters. But I'm going to cut off these kind of little triangles. And then just as they are, mass produce a few triangles. And then they all make great leaves somewhere. For some of your flowers, somewhere you're gonna find just the right leaf for the flower that you're making. So again, you can kind of filled my space, so I'm gonna make a few extra leaves and just have them scattered around. You know, feel free to give yourself a bird or a bug in here. Use your scraps for your pieces. Now, those are our leaves, those are centers, those are stems, those are flowers. Now let's talk a little bit about glue. The glue stays liquid for a long time, so we're not gluing things down and then they're gonna shift right away. Your project, maybe I should have mentioned this at the beginning, you should probably be creating somewhere where this can sit for a while. But we're gonna give a drop of glue to each stem, and if they get longer than your pinky, you wanna give them a drop of glue in 2 spots. We also are gonna put some drops of glue in each hyacinth, and then right down the middle of each lavender, in the middle of these scraps. And then as we're gluing our layers and our mosaic, I'm gonna use the yellow daisy here as an example. We're gonna glue strategically at the ends of the pieces. So I'm gonna put a little bit of glue in the middle, and then I'm putting a little bit of glue. Let's see if I can point. I'm letting it drop right here where they start to separate, because that's gonna glue them to each other, and it's also gonna tack them down to your base piece. We don't wanna put too much glue liquid. If you put too much liquid down, it will cause your pieces to float away. Now when we glue something really curly, you wanna glue it at 2 points where it touches the glass. So make sure you get 2 drops of glue in there. Same thing for the beads. Put a drop of glue where 2 beads are nice and close together. If it's a single bead, it just needs 1 drop of glue off the edge. Single pieces of mosaic, get 1 drop of glue as well, because this is going to make this tacky enough to bring back to the studio. And then on a petal like this, a drop of glue on each end as well will help that, will help secure that into place. Let's see, what else didn't I glue? Now when I leave this sit, this isn't going to, these aren't going to move easily at all. Once this glue is dry, it takes work to move the glass. So it's gonna dry. Now a quick lesson in picking up your piece. If you have really long fingernails, ask for help. Because really long fingernails get in the way. But evenly from each side, imagine picking up a really hot baking sheet with your fingers. You're gonna pinch it from the side, bring those fingers around and just like your hands are a vise, you can pick it up and move it and set it back down. So again, pinch in, you're holding on opposite sides, and then you can set it back down nice and even. And if you want to practice, maybe practice, turn a plate upside down. You could practice on that. Pick it up and then set it back down. And so make sure you've got a good grip. It's totally, I've done this on more than one occasion. I pick up your piece to move it over to the kiln. I don't have a good grip. I'm gonna set it back down right away. Don't feel like you have to just hold on to it for dear life. So that's the flower workshop. Now, if we were in the studio, I would say ready, set, create, and then walk around and see what you're doing. But a couple of changes. I'm still gonna say ready, set, create, but I'm going to stay on the video so that you can leave comments, so that you can ask questions, so that you can post pictures, because I really want to see what you are creating. I'm really excited about on this new platform. Excuse me. Now, as far as finishing up and when you're going to drop these off, Kevin and I are going to maintain Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 3 for you for dropping these off. If you aren't able to make it during that window of time, just shoot us an email, info@MoltenWorks. We are answering and responding to those. We also have the phone on during the 11 to 3 if you do need to give us a call and ask us some questions. But once you drop these off and drop your kit back off, we can get this into the kiln and get this back out to you. And then don't forget that as you create your flower, as you create your flowers, whatever you're doing today, you've got those 3 different garden stands, 4 different garden stands to choose from. And then you get 20% off of that garden stand if you're choosing that option for yourself today. So, and then tools back in the box, put those scraps back in the bag. If they're smaller than your thumbnail, they can go in the recycle. Same thing with the beads. Please bring those back. Our army of volunteers just makes those for us, and so it's always fun. We want to make sure those come back into the studio if you're not using them, although it does make a good worry rock, so maybe you need one in your pocket. So thank you very much for being part of our first Facebook Live workshop. It's been a lot of fun chatting with all of you and letting all of the secrets that are in my head flood out so that you can make beautiful flowers too. Thanks so much. Ooh. I talked for an hour.